We haven't read from this book in a long time, so I'm sure you'll be glad to hear it. What book are we talking about? This one. So we're going to read from chapter 31 through until we get to the end. Not to the end of the book, but to the end of what we feel like reading. So just sit back and enjoy if you like what you're hearing. Visit our YouTube and you can hit the link and subscribe to help us be able to provide readings and programming and things for other people. You can also visit our website. You can find the links there. Thanks for visiting us at our podcast or at our YouTube channel. Whichever one you are at now, listening to this, we appreciate you very much. And we like the opportunity to share new thoughts, ideas, and insights with those who are open to them during an age of stupidity. Yes, stupidity among our political leadership anyway. And so, here we go. Happy to be free, chapter 31. When we were safe in orbit, George tapped the beer meister and gave us each a drink. He scratched a scruffy beard that had grown in for over 2 months. Both of us were silent for a long time. I sipped on the strong imported beer. It was a reminder that Earth was there, a planet that we would probably never see again. I was despondent. At the same time, I was happy to be free from Blue Area. Little bit of a COVID cough left, please. Excuse me. All I could seem to remember about her was the good things, and all I could think was that I would never see her again. I know that she loved me too, in the twisted way of her culture. I chugged my beer down. George looked at us for a moment and finished his beer. I thought you guys were dead, he said unceremoniously. I've been in orbit here for almost 10 weeks. I couldn't get this thing to move. I thought it was still connected to you, but I couldn't really sense anything. He scratched his beard again and headed for the beer meister to refill his mug. He leaned back against it and took a long drink. Being up here so long can make a guy crazy. John looked at him sadly. Being down there, it destroyed my life. He lowered his head, looking at the floor. I don't know if I can ever be the same. I could understand it completely. I shook my head and looked at George, who uncharacteristically was quiet, waiting for us to continue at our own pace. I took a long breath, deep breath, not knowing what was going to come out. All they said about this place is true, George. It's the most violent society I've ever seen. Rape, murder for sport, gladiator style killings, sex slavery. And I looked at John and then lowered my eyes, not wanting to meet his gaze. And men who make prostitutes of themselves so they won't be hurt. Men who sleep with the enemy because they're so afraid of being hurt by those psychotic monsters down there. I rested my forehead in my hand. Men who fall in love with their oppressors. I was so tired that I just closed my eyes. Tears began to roll down my cheeks, and I didn't do anything to stop them. I felt John's hands on my shoulders. Some men who become prostitutes so they won't get hurt, and some who fight until they're literally broken and become prostitutes so they won't get hurt. I looked up at John. John did understand. I hadn't spoken with him about his mid-adventures yet. George came and sat at the table. He was silent for several moments, not offering any advice, just being there for us. He spoke at last. A lot of horrible things have happened to you both. I wish I could have done more. The ship just wouldn't move. He smiled a bit, but it was a sad smile. I know that we can all work through whatever happened together. He looked up at us both. We've been friends for a long time. Through all of the jousting, the arguing, and fun making, we've been there for each other. I'm here for both of you now. If we support each other, everything will be fine. John smiled. With all the time we've been together, 10 or 15 years, that's been the only intelligent thing I've ever heard you say. George pursed his lips and looked at John through narrowed lids. I laughed to myself. I'll let go of that one for now. He reached for John's beer. Want another one? When have I not, George? I genuinely smiled for the first time in weeks. I think it's time to get sloshed, I said. Let's have 10 more drinks to us. George took my mug and John's and refilled both. How long were we down there? I asked. They don't have calendars. Ah, George smiled. You were down there for 2.5 weeks. Pretty interesting. Eh. Actually, George said, you were down there for 2.5 months. Pretty interesting. Eh. Skip to another section. Kara sat in front of the mirror again with her long platinum hair hanging over her shoulders, brushing it ever so slowly and thoughtfully. She thought of Rob and wondered why he had left her. She thought that she would cry, but she fought back the tears and sat up straight. She had told him to wait for 2 weeks and to return. She had said that it would be all right if he decided not to come and to just go. At the time, she didn't know how much she really loved him, as strange as he was. He was so feminine, but loving and gentle with her. He made her laugh a lot. That was something that no one else had ever done. It was as if he could see right inside her and touch the most vulnerable parts of her. She tossed the brush down. How dare she think that she had the right to be happy? On this planet, she was a slave, given a royal title, honored by everyone, supplied with food and clothing. Everyone would have envied such a life, but she was a slave to this planet and to the whims of the people. A slave in a gilded cage. She picked up the brush again. It seemed that her only relief came from doing something slow and tedious. A beat came from the door. She looked over her shoulder. Enter, she said loudly. Raina came into the room. She looked. In Raina's hand there was a scroll. She dreaded it. Probably another news flash about some tyrants in North Country ravaging a village or something. During this time of year, someone was always at war. She could feel it in her bones. Raina seemed very excited. Maybe it was good news. Mother, I have good news for you. Kara smiled and swiveled in her chair. Good news? She leaned back. That's something new. Give me your good news. 2 planets are close enough to do a jump to Aqua. We have some escort fighters and tankers on the way. Kara exhaled audibly. Hardly good news. She spun around on her chair, looked in the mirror again, and picked up her brush. She jutted out her lower lip. She couldn't be bothered with such foolishness. That's not all, Mother, Raina said patiently. Kara turned and faced her again. Seems that sensors had picked up something going on in the blue area. She handed her a scroll. There seemed to have been an overthrow. Icor, the royal family, all of the leadership wiped out by two men. Their descriptions fit the two men who you were talking about. Grainer grinned a self-satisfied grin. Kara read, "Sounds like Rob and John. How'd he get on Aqua?" Rainer shrugged. "In any event, they escaped in a silver spaceship. They may be coming back." Her concern had turned to anger as she narrowed her eyes, her jaws clenched as she spun around on her stool and looked at Raina through the mirror. "Might they? Why are they coming back here?" Raina threw her arms around her neck. "Because one of them loves you." She looked into Kara's eyes. "He's been trapped on Aqua for some reason. Now he's coming back for you." Kara smiled a crooked smile. "Well, let's see if he loves what he sees now." Raina tilted her head back slightly and looked into Kara's eyes through the mirror. "You gave him the royal jewels, didn't you? That means you're married." Kara pursed her lips. "I was a different person then." Raina stepped back and swung Kara's stool around so they were facing each other. She placed her hands on Kara's shoulders and looked into her eyes with deep concern. "You were more yourself than any time in your life. You can't deny yourself that, or you'll hurt forever." She sat there thinking for a moment. "I guess you're right, John. I can't deny myself that, can I? If I do, I'll pay the price forever." She gently removed Raina's hands and turned to face the mirror again. "We can't put up with that, child, can we?" Chapter 32. I had fallen in love. It felt good to be in the captain's seat again. The seat contoured itself to my body as if it missed me. It seemed to have reset itself, or something happened on the planet that had changed me so that I was not connecting too much with the ship. I pulled up a vid screen. A three-dimensional enhancement of the planet below appeared in front of the viewport. I was a bit tired and emotionally drained. On that planet, it seemed that my life had ended. All of my pride had been taken away from me. I had done anything that it took to survive. Worse than that, I had fallen in love with my captor like some ignorant schoolgirl. John thought it was just an abuser complex. When the person who is being abused clings more to the abuser looking for affection, this often happens in marriages where women are married to abusers. I used to smirk about such things. I never said it, but inside I felt that any woman who allowed herself to be abused and didn't leave should be. I thought that any woman with self-esteem in any kind of sense would get out of such a situation as fast as they could. Then I found myself in the same position on a planet and didn't even try to escape. I had given up because I thought that it was impossible. I didn't see any way of escaping. The fact that we had these shields and weapons with us hadn't even crossed my mind or John's either. I looked over my shoulder at him. He was looking down at the navigator's panel, probably looking at the same view that I was looking at up front. I turned away before he looked. At least he fought and tried to escape. That had broken him. Not trying to escape and seeing the beauty in that beast called Icor had broken me. I wondered about Kara. What would she think? Was she anything like Icor? How could I possibly know? What would it mean to go to Kara and live there as king if they were as violent as the people in Blue Area? I fine-tune the search on the vid screen by focusing my mind on blue area. The topographical three-dimensional map began to zoom in. I thought of the color blue. There before us stood the blue area. From the bird's eye view, thousands of troops were rushing in, overrunning the place. Maybe the one good thing that came out of all of this was the fall of Blue Area. They had been kidnapping and selling people as slaves for who knows how long. The victims of their raids could finally get revenge, and maybe they would outlaw such behavior. I sat back in my seat, satisfied. George stroked his upper lip with his finger, silently observing. Even he seemed to have changed a bit after sitting in orbit for more than 2 months. Who knows what being linked to this ship all that time and being alone had done to him? He motioned toward the screen. The infamous blue area A. He smiled. I noticed all of those other people rushing in, all kinds of colors on their uniforms, like banners or something. He turned to me. Different colors for different countries. More like city-states than countries. They're about the size of city-states anyway, John answered. In their wisdom, the people of this planet abandoned the idea of countries. They went back to tribal societies and allowed those societies to grow into what they call areas. There's a lot of violence down there and rivalry, but they do have the opportunity, especially now, to make peace. It's actually a very efficient system. There's less pollution and more diversity. It could be a pluralistic society if they did it right. George clicked his tongue. Interesting. Seems that these people were technologically and sociologically advanced at one time or the other and gave it up. He pointed at the vid screen. The light from one of those weapons down there looks like a particle beam weapon or something. May just be a coincidence, but they're effective. He leaned closer to the screen. That was something I had also noticed being around and moved around the city or traveling with I-Corps. It seemed that they had kept what worked and gotten rid of what wasn't necessary. I turned to George. They seem to be weary of technology on that planet. They don't like to use anything that will take away from the human need to work or at least use their bodies. That's probably why there aren't really any overweight ones there. They are from what I've seen, John said. Believe me, some of the richest ones are big fat slobs. When you've been a sex slave, you've seen it all. George raised an eyebrow but was silent. I felt embarrassed. John looked us over and grinned. You guys look a little uncomfortable, but that's the way it is. I exhaled audibly. You were a sex slave. I was a prostitute. George scratched his head. And I was a coward, sitting up here while you two were going through hell. I began to protest, but he cut me off. Let's stop blaming ourselves for surviving. Horrible things have happened to us, and it wasn't our fault. We can talk about whether we should have taken the road to the right, left, or middle forever. It won't help anything. In this case, gentlemen, we were the victims, and we are free of guilt. I began to speak. George cut me off. Guilt-free, he said loudly. So let's get on with it. He looked at me. Seems that the ship was imprinted on us in the positions that we started in. Where do you want to go next, Captain? We can go to Kera or somewhere else. We can even go home, trying to make up a story. I don't like that idea, John said. I thought about it for a moment. We can actually go anywhere as long as the ship doesn't act up again. I'd go for that, George said. How about you, John? I asked. I agree. I looked back at him. He was looking down at the floor. He looked very disappointed. How about Anna and Sharon? He looked up slowly and shook his head. I could swear he was about to cry. But he quickly sucked up the tears. I looked at George. He was silent. He swished up his face in deep thought. Told his head slightly. I just don't know. Maybe it just won't work. How about Kara? He asked me. I sighed. Seemed like something left me with my breath. I was so ashamed of what I had done that I couldn't face her. I looked down at the 3 stones. Let's go, I said. We began a slow journey out of the solar system when we noticed there were a lot of ships there. We were not alone. Several ships were making a jump from Kara to Aqua. My disappointment left me momentarily, and the scientist in me spread its wings. I couldn't believe my eyes as I pointed to one of the biggest ships I had ever seen. It must have been what was known as a mothership in all of the science fiction movies. It was shaped like a saucer, but it looked as big as an Olympic stadium. It was made of shiny silver metal with a large red line of light running around the edge. Several large studs made of silver protruded along the edge. Several small ships, round also, accommodated and accompanied the movement of the ship. They were probably upgraded models of the ship that Kara left wrecked on the planet. John stepped closer to the viewport. If only I had a camera. He looked over at me. Just think of the pictures we could take. I looked at George. Now you have to have a camera somewhere, George. Better than that, he got up and headed to the back of the ship. Let me look in my trunk here. He began to rummage through an army green trunk until he found an old box. He pulled it out and began to open it. Here it is. He held up a camera. This is a Super 8 movie camera. Not only will we have pictures, but moving pictures and in color. Cool, I said. John looked at him. Very good. I hope that you have film in that, though. Knowing you, George, you have probably forgotten it. The corners of his mouth turned out slightly, though he tried to hide it. George's left eye squinted halfway shut. He looked at John for a while before speaking. Trying to bait me, are you? He grinned. Sorry, won't work this time. I have everything I need to work this baby. John just smiled. I sent a telepathic message to the ship. I'm taking us closer so we can get a better shot, I said. And that's the end of the reading today, folks. We'll pick up again soon. Very, very soon. Starting from the middle of chapter 32 and moving on. Namaste. Thanks for being with us. Visit our website. Hit the bell if you're watching us on YouTube and subscribe to help us and support the show for nothing. Or you can go to our website right now, find our Patreon, and join us for $2. Yes! $2 a month. So we can provide better content. Have an excellent day, and may your lives be as beautiful as your thoughts and your desires. Namaste, folks.